Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I will be talking about Kamala, her run for president, policies, and backlash, and I will be giving my thoughts on this whole entire election cycle. Now, the election is drawing near, and as we know, Kamala Harris is running for president for the Democratic Party, and her campaign, from the looks of it, is having a good run, especially after the announcement of Tim Walz as her choice for vice president. Now, I've been seeing up and down my Instagram feed and TikTok For You page about this news when it first broke out about Joe Biden dropping out of the race and endorsing Kamala Harris for president. From people who were overly excited, to people who were relieved that Joe Biden is out of the race, to people who are simply skeptical and have their questions concerning Kamala, to defeatist mentality, finita, to people who downright despise this woman and make it clear that they are not going to support her. I have many thoughts about this. There is the group of people who are overly excited about Kamala's presidential run, and it will further motivate them to vote blue no matter who, and I understand there are reasons why. There are the group of people who will vote for Kamala simply on the grounds that she is a woman and a woman of color, and since there has never been someone like her in the presidential seat, that alone would be a historic win and one for the books. I see Kamala, much like Obama, as a symbol of hope and progression that I, in my over 20 years of living in this country, am happy to be here to see. As a woman myself, I too would love to see a woman in office and be able to celebrate that. I too think it's something celebratory, inspiring, and motivating, as well as long overdue. I will first like to say that I see validity in the many points being made on all sides of the political spectrum in regards to people's thoughts surrounding Kamala. I happen to fall into the group that is excited, but also skeptical and have valid questions. The nuanced group, if you will. As a woman of color, and a person of Jamaican descent by way of my parents and a child of immigrants, I identify with Kamala. However, that's where it stops. I have learned in the last 7+ years not to just be swayed by surface level appearances, illusions of inclusion or progression, and identity politics. Here is where my skepticism and questions lie. Kamala Harris is a biracial/mixed woman. That's not me taking away her partially black identity, but she isn't a full black or dark-skinned woman, and on those grounds, that is where I do not identify with her. One can say, well, why should that matter? It half doesn't and it half does. If Kamala actually does things to produce tangibles for the community, and I mean black community in particular, especially for all black women, including ones like me, then I will give her props, support, and defend her, especially with facts when it's due. However, at the same time, she is not above reproach or criticism. I remember during her initial presidential campaign before 2020, it seemed her racial/ethnic identity was at the forefront of her whole campaign. And ever since Obama, I've seen more and more black people become less interested and impressed in having racial identity politics be the sole campaign selling point that particularly Democrats run on when wanting to garner black votes. Now, I am not deaf, dumb, and blind to the existence of overt and covert racism, even in nuance in our society, especially as it pertains to right-wing, ultra-conservative bigots, particularly on the Republican side of politics. However, we as a community have realized that the Democrats are not these perfect little angels that can do no wrong, and we have felt that they have taken our vote for granted while not producing any tangibles to progress the community, though we vote for them in high numbers almost by default every election. And you know the saying goes, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity. But at the same time, I have to call us out, and by us, I mean the Black community, for our lack of research and our wishful thinking. For instance, a lot of Black people, from what I saw, looked at Obama's presidential win as not only a historic win, but a win for the Black community and for Black people. A lot of Black people had the wishful thinking that Obama was going to come in and fix or reverse 400+ years of Black oppression and systematic issues in 4 to 8 years, and because because it didn't look like what black people, particularly black men, wanted their liberation to look like, they said Obama didn't do anything for black people. But funny enough, black people, mainly black men, are praising white man Trump and giving him credit for the things Obama had implemented, such as funding for HBCUs, pardoning/reducing sentences of people in prison, affordable health care, lowering unemployment rates, and fixing the economy, etc. But this is why Kamala Harris's biracial identity is something I highlight when everyone says she's black. No, she is a biracial woman, and that is okay. This is why I thought it was great and very fair that they highlighted Kamala as the first Black and South Asian vice president, rather than just the first Black vice president. I say this mainly because I do not want Black women to be so desperate for a win and representation that we A, wind up disappointed in the end, which is prompting even some Black women to not vote for Kamala if they vote at all, or B, we end up forgetting that there is a whole plethora of talented, intelligent, truly like-minded, and well-meaning, fully Black and dark-skinned women who need our support and who should be the representatives of our image, i.e. Michelle Obama is just one example. Now, there are some people, i.e. Fanita on TikTok, who are pessimistic and don't believe that there is any chance Kamala has at actually being elected due to the fact that she is a woman and a woman of color. Now, Fanita is not too well liked by certain people in the Black side of TikTok, and in recent times, rightfully so. However, the core of her message could still have validity. Another Black TikToker by the name of Crutches and Spice, as well as Ole from Alurinati on YouTube, while not agreeing with Fanita, said that it's not pessimistic or defeatist fully to understand the systematic challenges and realities of our society with all the overt and covertness of it, and how that will play a part in this election, especially now that a woman of color is running. I am praying this won't happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if we will get another Hillary situation and that good old electoral college comes in and does its thing like they did in 2016. This is why, at best, people are realistic, or at worst, they are pessimistic and defeatist about the situation, because we've seen it happen before. I am also seeing people in the Black community criticize her for her past as a prosecutor and the exaggerations or lies about how she falsely convicted and imprisoned thousands of Black men during her time as a prosecutor. However, come to find out, in my Cleopatra voice, that was false, and the true number of the men convicted and imprisoned was 45 men, and not all of them were Black. I have also heard about her Back on Track program that was supposed to treat misdemeanor crimes turned felony convictions as misdemeanor, such as maybe getting caught with a dime bag of marijuana. Also, the Back on Track program served as a rehabilitation program so people who were imprisoned could gain the skills to get back into society, such as get jobs. And we always talk about how felonies or people in prison, even for misdemeanor crimes that get treated like felonies, have a hard time adjusting if they are back into society, and then the cycle of crime continues again, if not makes it worse. I find it funny, but not surprising, the hypocrisy from these ultra right-wing bigoted people calling out Kamala for locking up thousands of Black men, quote unquote. But these people do not care about all these Black men being locked up. In fact, they usually support it because they automatically feel these men are guilty, even if not all of them are. So this concern about her role as a prosecutor and how it affected Black men is just virtue signaling. I also have to call out Black people for their lack of reading up on information as well as their hypocrisy. Just like I call out the right wing for their virtue signaling, I'm going to call out the Black community for its blind loyalty and care for Black men. We need to stop acting like there aren't Black people, particularly Black men in our community, that need to be locked up. There are definitely Black men that need to be locked up, and the increasing rates of Black femicide at the hands of Black men are proving it. There are people who believe that the people's vote does not really count, which is why some people have opted out of voting completely. There are people who believe that presidents are not elected, but selected, so it won't matter anyway. Although that defeatist mindset kind of annoys me, I understand that the system, especially for marginalized groups, does not play a fair game, so why should we keep playing by the rules? that no one else is playing by? Or why should we keep playing the game at all if we will just be on a hamster wheel going nowhere? But I also do agree with the saying that not voting at all, just like voting third party in this particular situation we're in, is a vote for the other guy. And in this case, we do not want to give the other guy our vote. Now, you have the right to support and vote for who you want and the right not to vote at all. However, in this case, I do think that a vote for a particular red party male presidential candidate that I see Black people, of course, Black men in particular, increasingly voice their support for is not the best move, especially with agendas like Project 2025 most likely coming down the pipeline. I'll be honest, I am not a fan of Trump, and I give his voters and supporters, especially the Black ones, a side eye, and I shake my head in disappointment and disagreement. Though I do understand that it is one's right to do so by their free will, in this situation, I see more harm being done than good if he gets elected, especially as it pertains to Black people and Black women in particular. Now, the only quote-unquote rational reasons I see why Black people are voting for Trump is the growing resentment and exhaustion with the way we feel the Democrats have treated Black people, and of course the economy, which I don't believe Trump is the best person for. Economic instability and uncertainty in this day and age since C-19 in 2020 is one of the main things affecting Americans. I understand that a bad or shaky economy affects all groups, especially most vulnerable ones like the Black community. With prices for necessities such as groceries being so high, rent prices through the roof, people are upset about the lack of livable wages and jobs. That's something as minute as a $1,200 check that he didn't even cut to us. It was Congress. This was enough for them to garner their vote and their support for him. The resentment and exhaustion from Black people towards the Democrats have been steadily increasing in the last 8 to 10 years or more. Black people more and more have been voicing their disappointment and disapproval of the Democrats and criticizing their actions of trying to garner Black votes every 4 to 8 years with the same and increasingly ridiculous tactics, such as getting rappers and entertainers to speak on Black community issues such as Quavo, Beyonce, and Cardi B at Kamala Harris's rallies, where Megan Thee Stallion performed one of her songs and was twerking during the performance, which really gave a bad optic look for the Democrats who are trying to garner Black votes. Some, if not most, of these celebrities in our community are not well versed in or are equipped to speak on an intellectual or academic level. We do have Black professionals, especially in the realm of politics and economics, that are more than capable and intellectual enough to speak to and for us. I also agree that we should hear about policies that produce tangibles and not just have the Democratic candidates put on a show. However, I do not see Black people calling out Trump for using these same tactics that we complain about the Democrats for using. I also have to call out Black people because we criticize and complain about the Democrats using these trivial and stereotypical tactics like using celebrities, entertainers, and rappers to speak on our behalf and represent us in these situations. And then I see us bring a bunch of Malcolm X quotes and talk about how Malcolm X said we need to be weary and we shouldn't allow celebrities to speak for and represent us in politics. Yet, who do we give more attention to or focus on more often? Is it the professional Black people in the political field, or is it the rappers and entertainers and other celebrities? I also don't see Black people pressing Trump about policies, nor do I hear an exact plan or policy that's going to directly or indirectly positively affect the Black community, all while saying the reason they are voting for him and leaving the Democratic Party or plantation is because of no progressive policies or not getting anything done for the Black community. But this man has concepts of a plan. Also, in this case, I see Black people who get upset about the results of voting for Democratic candidates but feeling like they do not deliver, which is valid. However, this is how you know that the average American person, Black people included, are not fully educated when it comes to politics. Politics does not start and stop with the president. The amount of Black people I see complaining about presidents and what they did or didn't do for the Black community specifically goes to show how Black people only view politics as being presidents and political parties. You guys got mad at Obama for quote unquote not doing anything specifically for the Black community or for Black people, but what was Black people's plan to bring to Obama for Black people? What were you doing those 4 to 8 years Obama was president? Did you vote in the midterm elections? Were you active in your local politics? These are the questions I had to ask myself as well. I used to work for a local, well, now former local politician, and I worked with constituents on a daily basis. So I see how local politics can be just as, if not more, effective as national politics. I also do not think that Black people really come with a well-written, well-thought-out plan or agenda for what we want for ourselves, but complain about nothing getting done, and also complaining when we see other groups of people seemingly getting more than we are. However, Black people, did those other groups of people just get something? Or did they actually have competent advocates on a grassroots to national level who got in a room with each other and said, okay, here are the issues that we are facing. Here is what we want, and you can meet us at least 80%. This is exactly what Killer Mike said. Although I do not approve of him, I guess, siding with Kemp now just to spite Stacey Abrams, but I digress. But this is exactly what he said. How do we get all of us in a room who are on different sides of the political ideology spectrum, and we take the good of what each person has and put it in a 10 to 12 point agenda or plan to give to every local, state, and national politician? Do we do that, or do we just complain? I am not shocked that there is a sector of non-Black people who are upset and outraged at Kamala's run for president, not only because these are people who are anti-Democrat, but because they are anti-people of color, anti-woman, anti-progressive, anti-leftist or left-leaning, etc. It doesn't surprise me that a part of the backlash she is receiving is due to surface-level reasons such as being a woman of color, and much like with Obama running for and becoming president, there are still people in this country who do not like the idea of a person who is part of insert marginalized group here, being in a high, successful, and most visible and respected position, such as a president. Because for the longest time, the image of America and the image of success in America and the image of high status in America, especially the presidency, was always seen as white, male, straight, biologically born, US born, able-bodied, etc. Now, some people on the right have coined Kamala Harris's replacement of Joe Biden running for president as a quote-unquote DEI hire president. This term has become a very popular and overused talking point to the point of ad nauseum by right-wing and conservative people, pundits, and media. It has been used as a replacement for the word woke, another term that initially was meant to be positive/progressive or at least neutral, but has been hijacked and watered down by mainstream liberal media and sullied by conservatives. Now, I will say this, due to the current and growing climate of Black people's apathy, skepticism, and criticism towards the Democratic Party, which as an independent myself, I find very valid, Black people increasingly no longer want to be taken advantage of by the Democratic Party by being made promises we do not feel they keep, which is not entirely true. I do agree with people who say that Kamala shouldn't feel entitled to the Black vote simply on the basis of her being Democrat, half Black, or simply not being Donald Trump, and the quote-unquote lesser of two evils. She should actually show and work towards proving herself worthy of earning our vote, no different than any other candidate. She should heavily focus on progressive or at least harm reduction, harm prevention policies that are centered around or at least beneficial to the Black community. However, I do notice an increase in favor of Trump in the Black community, particularly from Black men, not surprising at all, despite his track record of his views towards Black people, his lack of progressive policy directed at Black people, despite some of the rhetoric being spewed by his Black supporters and overlooking his problematic ways, etc. This also reminds me of a person on TikTok who said, "It's so funny how we will believe the worst about our own people while simultaneously pedestalizing people of other groups while ignoring or overlooking how problematic people of those other groups are." This is very evident in Kamala's case. Kamala is the career politician with more experience in the world of politics than Trump is. Even though you may not agree with her career as a prosecutor and a DA and whoever, she still has a better track record in terms of experience and policy than Donald Trump does. Trump is an inexperienced, incompetent, non-career politician that was able to finesse his way into the presidency using overt right-wing rhetoric and white rage backlash to Obama being president and fear-mongering and the increasing disapproval of left-leaning / progressive ideologies to his advantage, especially since 2016 and 2020. These things are what cause people to overlook his 34 felony convictions or his incompetence in handling C-19 in the beginning, or for more marginalized groups, reversing progressive policies like Roe v. Wade. Yet I will see in comment sections Black people nitpick at the things Kamala did or didn't do, not really knowing how politics and policies work. I'll see comments saying, well, where was she during those 4 years as vice president doing something for Black people? Not knowing or caring that a vice president's job is mostly done behind the scenes. I also notice that if things are not loud and in our face, Black people do not think it's happening. And to be honest, I'm a little guilty of that myself. However, I'm aware of the potential, if not guaranteed, dire consequences that will happen if someone like Trump gets in office, i.e. Project 2025. In this case, despite how you may feel about her, Kamala is a better candidate and choice for the presidency in comparison to Trump, so much so that even Republicans and former Trump voters / supporters are endorsing her and voting for her. This is not an endorsement for her on my part, but more of a comparative observation. My issue with the imbalanced scrutiny that Kamala is receiving versus Trump, coming from Black people specifically, is not because I believe she is above reproach, but because I am seeing more grace being given to white man Trump, who is overtly problematic, than I am seeing given to Kamala despite Trump's flaws. This is especially evident to me during the presidential debate. Although I will admit I was not impressed by all of her answered upon listening attentively, and I was not a fan of how she answered some of her questions. In comparison to his answers, I believe she is much more competent when it comes to planning, leadership, and merit than Trump is. I do know, however, that if Kamala does get in, she will absolutely have to deliver on her promises at least 80%. Because let's be honest, we are not going to get 100% right off the bat, especially in 4 years. And I also believe she'll have to stay scandal-free, or she will suffer the consequences of the glass cliff and be made an example of, further validating the negative ideologies about DEI hires, identity politics, and surface-level performative progressive movements. Now, the glass cliff is a term used to describe a phenomenon where women or other marginalized group members are more likely to be promoted to higher leadership positions, especially when a company or institution is failing. And notice what's going on in this country, especially as it pertains to the economy. The goal is basically these people are placed in these very precarious positions that on the surface look like a marginalized individual who could be very well capable and competent to do the job are breaking through the glass ceiling and making a difference, but the greater system and foundation of that glass cliff is already unstable and designed for that individual to fail. So if and when they do fail, they are made an example out of as to why quote-unquote DEI positions are inherently flawed and it's not based on merit and it doesn't bring out the best and brightest. This is why women and people of color, Kamala being both, are not supposed to be in high power or high level positions, etc. I really do not want this to happen to Kamala because unfortunately there are so few of us, Black women, marginalized groups of people, women in general, being represented in high leadership or highly visible positions that not only do we desperately latch onto any quote unquote representation we get, but when that one representation looks bad in the public eye, it comes back on all of us as a group, which it shouldn't, but unfortunately we do not get the luxury of individuality. Although I do believe one has the right to support or vote for who they want, I do not believe Trump is the right answer or person for the presidency, politics nonetheless. I will be honest, I do feel uncomfortable, cringe, and disgusted and annoyed when I see people in comment sections on social media with hashtag Trump 2024 or talking about the migrants, LGBTQ, or quote unquote woke politics and ideologies, and all the crazy people involved in it as a motive for why they are voting for him, especially when it's coming from Black folks. Oftentimes, these anti-Kamala, anti-Democrat, and pro-Trump talking points and statements come with no knowledge or nuance on what they are talking about, especially the lack of nuance. I think people are still very binary and surface level with how they view politics. Sometimes I'm included in that as well. I see so many of these small town and poor folks, usually white, who probably lack the education and world experience, or who 9 times out of 10 are these Gen X and boomers who are so reluctant or repelled by the idea of change that anything that seems even remotely progressive, even if it's relatively harmless, is an offense to them, and they feel it takes their comforts and privileges away. So people like Trump can play on that fear, even though he still doesn't care about these people, but he only cares about himself. Now, to play devil's advocate, upon hearing the issue that is going on with things involving the T in LGBTQ and the migrants at the border, etc., I do feel that there is a need for rational concern and questioning. However, I often see these conversations about these topics take an extreme right-wing turn that lacks research and nuance on the topic, and often blame Democrats and quote unquote wokeness for the cause of these issues. This is also very dangerous because now people are going to emotionally vote in the opposite direction, thinking that they are making the right decision, no pun intended, doing so, and it just results in the undoing of rights that have been fought for and by marginalized groups, and we can't let that happen. All in all, I really do want the best outcome for Kamala, Black women, the economy, and the country overall. So yes, those were my thoughts. Tell me what you think in the comment section. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will come back at you with the next one. Bye.